Hi, 5 years as a developer, and these are some of the lessons that I've learned. Never work in production. Trust me, that's a rookie mistake. And for me, in my earlier days, I still remember working in production would sometimes result in very costly mistakes. For example, maybe accessing a production database and you are doing something, and unfortunately, you forget that you're actually connected to the production database and maybe delete or insert certain items in there, and unfortunately that then distorts the whole database or something like that. So never work in production. You'd rather develop in test, and then of course you need a production feel of it, because you can't just upload something unless the test and production have pretty much the same values. But obviously you have to have a production run that's at least controlled. But if you are going to be just developing, then you better develop with some sample data instead of live access data, because that might result in very costly mistakes. Soft skills are very important. I know a lot of developers who can develop well, but they can't communicate even their own code to maybe other developers or a team or something like that. Just look at this list of soft skills and tell me which skills you think you have as a developer, right? So you see there's communication. Some people can't even communicate well. Interpersonal skills, like just conflict resolution within the team, because it's not always that you're going to be seeing eye to eye with your team or with your manager or something like that, but you also have to resolve those conflicts, or at least patch up some of these things so that you can develop the product, and because that's the end goal from whatever you'll be doing within the team, right? So I think it's something to note that these soft skills are very much important. So you see, there's also teamwork, there's problem solving, leadership, because also in some instances, you have to be a team leader. Then there's time management, adaptability, critical thinking. You have to be creative, work ethic, etc. So these are just examples of soft skills, but there are numerous other soft skills that are there. And I would argue that there are many developers who think, if I just develop a product and it's perfect, it's working well, it's done, right? But you get in certain roles where you now have to explain this product or this app that you have created to others, maybe a team or even users who are going to be using it, but you can't communicate it effectively. So you always get frustrated because you think people are not learning enough, or people don't want to learn your system. Whereas it's actually the other way around. You aren't communicating it well to the other people. So you have to have soft skills within your arsenal. And I would argue that there are many developers who say you develop some application, right? It's a very good application. It has a very wide range audience, but you can't market it well. So how do you think it's going to go out to the public, right? If you can't market it, no matter how good it is, even if it speaks and it flies and it makes your phone turn into a transformer or something, it doesn't change a thing if you're not going to market it well. There are people who market low value products and they're actually richer than developers who create very good products but can't market or can't communicate because they don't have these soft skills. People don't like pointless updates. Now, obviously, this is arguable, right? But just follow me on this. And I want you to see something in this instance. There were certain apps that I developed, just a few. You can check them out on the link in my description. And you see that within these apps, right, you'd create something, or maybe you leave out something, and then you create another version and update on maybe Google Play Store, App Store, something like that, so that people can download the app because you know the problem, but they don't, right? So once a person feels that, you know what, I can use this app and this app doesn't have any problem, even if you update it and say you want people to update because you had left out something, people might not be so much enticed because it's already working in that instance. So you'd see that you have an app, but there are people who are on like 5 different versions. There's someone on version 1, there's someone on version 2, there's someone on the latest version, etc. going on like that. Or you can look at iOS updates. Now, I also review iOS updates on this channel. You can check out my videos. But I want you to see something with these updates. There are certain updates that they put out where it's just an update, a security update. There are no features, there's nothing like that. And people usually watch reviewers so that they see what it offers before actually updating and if it's worth it. So people are always skeptical because they think, okay, if I update, there are usually problems with the battery and stuff like that. And obviously, people don't want to backtrack and say, okay, I now want to downgrade that version and have the earlier version. With applications, it's even worse because you would have to like search some certain repositories to get the earlier version if, let's say, the latest version you have has a problem, which the developer now needs to fix again. So people are always skeptical of updates, especially if they seem pointless. Because if the app is already working, then people just say, okay, why do you want us to update, right? What's the point of, what's the point? Like, why do you want us to update? What we would do on mobile applications back in my previous job was we would force the user to actually update. And most apps, in fact, most or even all apps actually force users to update. So they say, let's say you open the app, they on the first page, or maybe if it's a loader or something like that, on that first page where there's a splash, or maybe on the home page, they then fetch from somewhere the latest version, or in our case we were using Firebase Remote Config, which is free. So you just use Firebase Remote Config if the user is connected to the internet, and you store a string which has the version number of the latest update of the application. Then it just checks the current or the user's version number with that, with the number in the Firebase Remote Config. Then once they do that, it determines whether they need an update or not. Then it returns like a page which says update and something like that. At first we would say update, then we have another button where it says cancel. But obviously someone would just cancel and say, no, I don't want to update. Because if it's working, it's working. People don't really like updates as much, especially if it's working, because they don't want the uncertainty of not knowing what else is going to be changed. What if things don't start working in the same way or something like that? Unless if you develop a trust relationship with the user where your app is perfectly working for quite a lengthy period of time, and they would feel the need to actually update. So obviously forcing WhatsApp also does that. It tells you, no, this version is out of date. So you can't even go into WhatsApp. You have to be forced to update, then you can go into WhatsApp again. So most people obviously now do that. So if you are developing as a developer, you also have to consider that, to say some people will not want to update your application. So in the very, very first version, put a functionality in there where it checks from somewhere, be it database or wherever, checks whether this user is on the latest update. And if they are not, force them to update, or at least alert them that there's an earlier version which has certain features. Write elastic code. That is gold. Now, obviously, the word elastic in this case might be used in a different sense, but what I just mean is write code that can expand without you actually needing to write more code. Now, I'll explain it in this way, right? Especially in our setup, like in the Zimbabwean setup, most probably it's the same in many other different countries. Users change requirements pretty regularly. So if you develop your app and it's just static, and any change that the user requests needs you to actually get into the code and write more lines and things like that, then you are just going to give yourself more work. Your code should be as reusable, right, to an extent where even if there's a change, that change might seem insignificant to you because it's just simple work. You are just maybe plugging in something or adding in something to your plugin. So basically, reusable code works, and I can vouch for this because earlier in my career, I still remember I had this kind of mentality where if I learn a programming language or a framework, for example, I study it and I know how it works, and I start coding with that language, let's say Dart and Flutter. You just stick to your principles and say, okay, I learned this and I'm just going to stick to that. I don't want to learn something new in the future. Like I'll just use shared preferences and not even want to, use any state management or provide or something like that as an example, right? And in that instance, it would work because your things would work perfectly. But the challenge comes when you now want to make that code reusable in other components as well, because you'd have to sort of copy paste in all those other classes or something like that. Whereas you can just create one class which feeds into the other components, and then it works fine. If to be as controversial as ever, no one ever helps. You heard me. So what I'm actually saying there is, with the development, especially in some spaces, people sometimes like to make it a competition. I think it's the same in almost every space. Like even in content creation, some people just feel like if someone maybe is successful in their own right, maybe this is not even about content creation and development, even as a lesson of life. If someone gains success or learns something new and they want to make sure people like know that I've learned something new, I'm there, I'm at the top or something like that. You have to be confident within that space, so I don't think there's really any problem with that. So obviously in the development space, sometimes people just don't help. Now it depends, which is why this point is arguable, because in some spaces people generally help, definitely help. In some spaces, people will give you resources, try and assist in as many ways as possible. But in other cases, people just don't help, especially if they are on higher positions. They'll just prefer you to look at it from your own point of view. And then when you are successful, they then come for help. Wow. That is. So yes, these are the lessons that I learned as a developer. And yeah, there are more lessons that I think other developers can also communicate as well. If you have any other lessons or any other points that you want to share, then you can share them in the comments down below. Like and share and subscribe.